Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB Pro Classic Physique. Today's guest is Braden Bentley. Braden, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, man.
For sure, Braden. So you said you've heard a couple of the episodes. So the first question that's coming. Who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
So I didn't grow up getting, into bodybuilding. I was always an athlete, so like football, basketball, that's where I always kind of had my idols, if you will. But when I started getting into competing was like 2013, 2014. And the one dude that always stuck out to me was Dennis Wolf. Just being a little bit more of a similar physique, being a taller guy. There wasn't all that many tall guys that you would see competing. So Dennis was always somebody that I was really attracted to in terms of like, man, that's a wild physique. But then from there, once I started everyone likes Arnold, that's a cheesy one. I don't even like to throw it out there. But then another one was Barry DeMay. That was kind of a Barry DeMay and Milos. Those were two physiques that they weren't the biggest dudes, but they had really good flow, really good lines. And for whatever reason, that's always kind of resonated with me being a little bit taller as well.
Very, very cool. Dennis Wolf, man. I don't know why, but his name doesn't come up too often, but he was a freak of freaks. And there was maybe a 5 to 7 year period. He was a top contender every year going into the Olympia. And I don't know if he's kind of been forgotten or what, but definitely respect for saying that. Now, I want to ask you, sometimes I ask this, sometimes I don't, but just some of like the current open guys, some of the current classic physique guys, are there any guys in those categories currently competing that you really look up to or you really respect their physiques?
Most of it's probably open. I don't, being in classic physique, I don't really look at too many other classic physique guys. And I mean, everyone knows Chris is a fantastic physique, right? He's the champ for a reason. So that's going to be tough to beat. But in the open, a lot of the young guns, I like a lot of the physiques coming up. I mean, Brett Wilkin, he's a buddy of mine and Cole's. So I always root for him. He's not just a physique, but like his work ethic and everything. That's something that anybody can take away from. But then Hunter's got a crazy physique. So there's a few guys I do really like. Some of the oddballs would be like Quentin Richardson from Canada, being another taller kind of aesthetic looking guy. There's quite a few guys, especially in the open, that I definitely look at and try and pull some motivation and inspiration from.
Love that. All right. So tell us, Braden, at what age did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
Oh, man. So I probably started actually training and lifting, I would say like 9th grade. And that was just for sports. That was straight up for football. And even back then, looking back on it, it was awful. It wasn't the most structured training. I was just getting in the gym, just trying to throw some weights around with some buddies. And it's always been something that's kind of been there. I always played sports. So all throughout high school, the gym was an aspect. Played a little bit in college, and gym obviously was an aspect. And when all of the competing, in a sense, was done, that was just kind of the one constant that was always there. But I probably didn't start training for like, a bodybuilding purpose till I was 23, 24, somewhere in there. So probably 6-7 years, really.
Cool. All right. Now, you've already brought up sports, so I kind of want to learn a little bit more about your childhood, your upbringing. Talk to us a little bit about where you grew up. I know you're currently in Minnesota. I don't know if you grew up there or not, but talk about where you grew up. Talk about a little bit more of the sports that you played. Talk about family dynamics. And then kind of, because sports was such a big part of your life growing up, just like it was for me, there's a lot of lessons to be learned within sport, right? So maybe just tell us, whether it was football or basketball or whatever sport you really maybe took away some life lessons from while you were growing up.
Sports was always something I was into. It was kind of everyone around me in my family had been into some sort of an athletic. I started playing golf with my grandpa when I was 2. Like I could barely walk, but I could swing a golf club. So anything with a ball, that's always been something I've been good at. It's been easy for me to pick things up and progress with them. So sports was kind of a natural fit. And I grew up in Stewartville, Minnesota, which is just south of Rochester. So, I mean, we're talking, 5,000-6,000 people, maybe. It's not a very big town. When I was growing up, we had 1 stoplight. We have 3 now, but we had 1 to begin with. So, I graduated with like 120 people, something like that. So it wasn't a big area by any means, but sports was a big focal point. We weren't all that great at sports, but that was me being driven. I did a lot of external stuff. So I did a lot of the individual camps and things like that, just ways to progress more for myself. I just always liked practice. If I could find an excuse to go travel to some place to go practice with people better than me, that was always something I enjoyed. I never really liked being the better one. I always wanted to kind of be the younger guy or with people that were much further along. I always felt like I learned more. So I did a lot of that type of stuff, kind of trying to get my name out there to colleges and stuff like that. I just had injuries and partied way too much in school to actually be really worth a damn. But it was fun while it lasted. But yeah, sports were definitely kind of the main. That's what I thought I was going to do forever. As a kid, once you start, you don't think you're ever going to stop. So I rode that out until it was too much, really.
Very cool. So talk a little bit then about your parents, because obviously when you're younger, you're not driving yourself around to all these camps. So, I mean, and they all cost money, because I kind of lived that same life when I was a kid. I was very fortunate to have, great parents, come from an upper middle class home. So talk about that. Talk about your parents a little bit. What did they kind of instill within you? What did they kind of teach you, whether through what they said or how they lived their lives? And then after you kind of touch on that, tell us a little bit about, once you were wrapping up with high school. Obviously you were focused on sports, but probably by the time you were in high school, you knew at some point sports were going to be over. So once you were finishing up high school, what did you kind of want to be when you quote unquote grew up? So parents, and then what were you thinking about post high school?
Yeah. So, I mean, I had a pretty good upbringing, like small town Minnesota. There's not a lot of poverty, if you will. Everyone for the most part is kind of on the same level. But my parents were fantastic in terms of letting me do a lot of those extracurricular things. That was a big thing that a lot of kids didn't get that opportunity. They may have progressed better or faster than I did, had they had those opportunities, but I was lucky enough to actually have those, and I sought those out. I had to do my research. My parents weren't finding me camps. They weren't doing things like that. I had to find them. I had to go seek them out, but they were always supportive. I mean, I remember I was like 8th grade. My mom drove me to South Bend to go to Notre Dame for a football camp. Like we turned it into a family trip. So that's kind of what we would do. She brought me down to Dallas, Texas, like we went all over the place to do some of this stuff. So I was very fortunate, obviously, growing up. Not everybody gets that kind of treatment, but that's definitely led to the progress. And a lot of it just kind of comes with a mindset. Like people give you those opportunities, you become very thankful, and you want to make sure that you give everything for those opportunities that you get. Because I also realized at a very young age that I was fortunate and that not everybody was going to have that. So I always kind of tried to make a point of being very passionate with everything I do and giving it 100% and not wasting it. Because I know that would have really pissed my mom off.
Very cool. So then once we got up to high school, what were you thinking about you wanted to be when you kind of grew up, or what you wanted to do with your life kind of in those high school years? And then once you graduated, I think you mentioned you played a little bit of football, but how did that kind of unfold?
Yeah. So, I mean, high school, I was still pretty naive. I figured sports somehow or some way was going to just last forever. I didn't really think much beyond college at that point. I was just kind of focused on, hey, where am I going to go? Try and find a scholarship. I ended up at Winona State University, which is just down the road. It's a Division II school. I just sucked at school. I'll be honest. I got the treatment of, you didn't have to do a lot of the assignments. You always kind of had help, and I just didn't really want to do it. And then eventually just like the competition aspect kind of faded for me, and it became less fun. It was more of a job. It was definitely more of a, hey, clock in, clock out type of a thing. And the competition was just different. It was, you still in college, everyone's driven, but it's buddy. And I wanted something more. I kind of was craving a little bit more of an individual effort type thing. And somehow, some way, I ended up in this bodybuilding endeavor from that.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, before we kind of get into all things bodybuilding, Braden, did you end up graduating college? And then how has kind of like, just a career outside of fitness, like how do you provide for yourself? How does that kind of unfolded over the years?
Yeah. So I didn't graduate. I did 2.5 years and then went into the military for a little bit. And then got out, and that was a competition thing. That was a way for me to, hey, what's another way to level up? And after that became bodybuilding. But since then, I've been pretty fortunate. My dad runs a pretty large steel manufacturing company, like 20 miles south of where I live. So for the last few years, I kind of on and off will help him whenever they need help. And the last 1.5 years or so, obviously it's been a lot harder for manufacturing facilities to keep people working. And then to get jobs, and they're in a really small town, but they're a pretty large company. So I've been spending a lot more time with them, just helping out, kind of doing odd jobs, being the boss's kid type thing. So it just whatever they need, running brake press, forklift, just kind of driving around. But then I also do a good amount of coaching and training clients. We have the Den, which I know Cole kind of touched on. That's our little private gym. That was something I'd wanted to do for a long time. So that in itself keeps me busy. And then whatever free time I have left beyond that, I just go and work for my dad down in Spring Valley.
Perfect. Love it, man. Okay. So let's talk about getting into bodybuilding and stuff. And it's kind of cool. I feel like you and I have a very similar path in terms of, like, I went and played a year of college football, and I'm just like, man, this isn't really for me. I just kind of wanted to honestly party more than do all that type of stuff. Wasn't really interested in school a whole lot because, dude, when you're an athlete, like, you really don't have to be, right? And you're always focused on the next game, and hanging out with the guys and stuff like that. And for me, bodybuilding, lifting weights was a huge outlet, especially in those younger college years, even though there was a lot of struggles for me personally during that time. And so talk about how you kind of got first exposed to bodybuilding, because you kind of lifted weights for sports and stuff. That's completely different, right? How did you get exposed to bodybuilding? And then talk about just kind of that transition of, like, man, like, I kind of like this, and I'm gonna kind of go for it.
Yeah. So I got introduced. I had moved up to California. I lived in Fresno, California for a little bit. And when I went out there, I just signed onto a room. Like, they already had 2 people living in this apartment. They just tossed me in there. And it was 2 guys from, like, the San Jose area. And I showed up, and I opened the fridge to put my shit in there. And it was just organized food everywhere. And I didn't know what the heck this was. Like, I had never seen somebody meal prep or any of this. And this dude, he just eventually was teaching me how to cook and prep. And I was asking, what in the hell are you doing this for? Like, what is the purpose? What's the reason? And so he's kind of the one that got me started on the path, but I still didn't really know what I didn't have any plans on competing or anything like that until I went out partying with a guy, and he wouldn't drink. And I couldn't figure out why. Like, what is up with this guy? And he said something about a competition. And so I looked at him, and I looked at me, and I was like, you know what? I could probably do that. So just like that night, I registered for a show that was, I don't know, 12, 14 weeks out. And the next day I started a diet, cardio, different type of training, and went for a show. It was a terrible showing. It was not a good idea. I don't suggest it to anybody watching. Don't do what I did. But I got bit by the bug. Losing, that's not something I had done a lot before that. I usually pick things up and was pretty good, pretty quick. And I got like 5th, at like a regional show. And I looked like dog shit. I did men's physique. I didn't even know posing. I had no help. I went and bought the Arnold Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. And that was my guideline. I 40, 40, 20. I just religiously followed that, and knew nothing, and went and I showed up at the show. I'd never been to a show before. And we had a local guy, I think Cole mentioned him, Ryan Fulton, who was kind of making a comeback, if you will. And he was at that show. And I just remember seeing him and thinking, holy shit, that's different. Like that was another level I had seen. So I literally just sat back like a fanboy and I just studied everything he did. I didn't ask him any questions. I just sat there and I watched him. I mean, I was backstage. I didn't have anything. I didn't know where I needed to go. So I sat there, I watched him, and then I picked a show 3 weeks later and did that and looked 10 times better. Yeah, it looked like I had done a full prep since then, just from picking up those little things from him. So once I saw that change from one to the next, it was like a 3-week difference. I was hooked. But after that, I took a good amount of time off because I knew I didn't want to do men's physique. That was quite apparent to me. So I took 3 years off to try and put some tissue on, and eventually classic physique became a thing. You know, that wasn't an option in 2014 when I started. So I figured I needed to take 3 to 5 years to grow. And when classic came out, it just kind of resonated in terms of the look. I felt like I kind of fit more to that mold.
Excellent. Now, I want to touch on, you said you got bitten by the bug, right? The bodybuilding bug. What specifically, Braden, kind of pulled you in, sucked you in? What was it that, like, maybe it's a couple things, but what's kind of that one thing where you're like, man, like, I love this. Like, I'm going to pursue that. Like, what was it? And I love asking that because we all kind of have a story of like why we got into bodybuilding or kind of what pulled us in. So what is that for you specifically?
I think the biggest thing was probably the discipline. Being an athlete, discipline is kind of something that gets instilled in you at a pretty young age. You got to show up to practice. You have to do these things, and no one's going to do them for you. Bodybuilding is very, very disciplined. Motivation's a great word, but discipline trumps motivation every day. None of us want to eat what we eat every single day. Some days it's great and we look forward to it. But it's the days that you don't want to. What are you going to do? So realizing and like kind of being exposed to, if you do have the discipline, you do get kind of what you want to get. Whereas you have control. That aspect was just addicting to me.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit more. You briefly touched on your first competition. You said you did men's physique. But talk about that a little bit more. There was that guy that you knew, I think, from Minnesota, was competing. You kind of observed him, but like actually going out on stage for the first time, you really didn't know at all what you were doing. I mean, were you nervous? Talk to us about that, because again, we all kind of have that first competition story. So go a little bit more in depth, and then talk about the competition that you did like 3 weeks later, and how were you able to change so much in terms of your appearance or your look?
Yeah. So I had, going into that first show, I didn't know coaches were a thing, but we had this guy locally named Ponce, and he helped me a little bit with posing. He's kind of that guy in the gym that would just tell you, yeah, that looks good, that doesn't look good. So I had a little bit of help on the posing aspect, but man, I was nervous. That I don't take my shirt off and go prance in front of everybody, and just flex on the stage. That's not natural to me coming from the sports world. So I was definitely nervous. I didn't know what to expect. It was a really small show. I think it was like the Gopher State. It's not even around anymore. So like expediting, like no one was really telling you where to go, what to do. So I just found people that wore similar things as me. It's like the trunks, and I just followed them around. I had no idea what I was doing. I remember being the guy on stage, trying to go off stage, go the wrong way. Yeah, it was a good experience. I will say that. But even, and I'm still to this day, I'm not a big fan, I guess, of the stage aspect. I much rather like the process of it all. But even then, like there was something about it that was just different. Wasn't really a nerve thing at a certain point. That kind of dissipated and went away. And then I was pretty driven. Like I wanted to do it again. Like I wanted to do it again, but do it better. That was probably the biggest takeaway I had, was I knew I wanted to do it again quick. because I knew I would learn fast. So I literally just went onto my phone. I think it was between prejudging and finals, like you get like a 3-hour break. And I just started looking up other shows. So I found one in Wisconsin that was 3 weeks later, the Fox Cities. And I just went and did it. I had a couple of friends that were doing it, some bikini athletes that were going over there. So I was like, hey, you know what? You guys are doing it. I'll go over with you, and did much better. I got the same placing, but it was a much bigger show. I think I took like 4th or 5th or something like that. But a few of the guys went on to do national level shows that year. So it was good to see that competition, because my first show, I mean, we had like 5 people in the class. And then I go to Wisconsin, and they do a lot of promotion for their shows. There was like 32 people. I mean, we had to stand off to the side for 5-6 minutes. It was a big show. So that, seeing a show on that level, that is probably what really started to, like, okay, you can do this. You're in the top portion here. Just get better. Just take more time, go back to the drawing board and get better and keep going.
Perfect. So let's talk about that time that you took off. So you did your first 2 shows, and then you're like, man, I probably need to take some time off to put on some tissue, right? So talk about kind of how did you kind of come up with that conclusion that you needed to do that, and then just talk about how your bodybuilding training, the lifestyle and everything kind of evolved from those first 2 shows to the point that you decided that you were going to step on stage after that 2 to 3 year break. So just talk about some of the details of that break.
Yeah. So I knew right away that the men's physique look wasn't really what I had aspired to. I wanted more than that. So I knew kind of right away. I was weighing my options. You either have men's physique or you have open. And seeing that, I was like, okay, I'm not there. We have Cole. I had always seen him. We hadn't lifted together or anything, but he was always kind of a guy in the gym typically. So I had seen him. I knew what bodybuilding looked like, and I knew I wasn't there. So I knew the realistic only thing was that it was going to take time. I'd seen how long it took to get into shape. So I knew it was going to take even longer to add muscle. And that's, I set out on no show date. I wasn't going to take a year off or 2 years off. I just was going to take time off. And it just so happened to be around 3 years. Only reason I even did a show was I was trying to get in shape for a wedding, to be honest. I was getting married in like 2017, 2018. So Classic Physique had just come out, and we had a show in Rochester for a couple of years. So I just signed up for that to get into shape for my wedding, and that pulled me right back into it. And then I was hooked from that. And that was my first Classic Physique show. Actually, no, I had one before that. I had one right before that in Wisconsin, but I think that was one of the first 2 shows or whatever that they ever had for Classic Physique. So it was different. It was very different. But once Classic came out, I definitely got the bug bite all over again. And I had added some tissue, so it's only progressed from that point.
So, in those early competitive years, Braden, did you have some people that kind of like gave you some positive feedback that kind of fueled the fire of you saying like, man, like I kind of like this. I love training, maybe I can do something with this. I mean, were there some people that kind of spoke into your life positively in terms of, hey man, like you've got great shape, whatever it might've been, to again, kind of fuel that fire that was within you? And if so, talk about that feedback.
Yeah. At the beginning, I was pretty solo. I did a lot of it on my own, and I'm glad I did. That forced me to kind of do the research and trial and error. That was my biggest thing, is just trying stuff. I would know right away if I liked it or if I didn't, or if it worked or it didn't. But as I got going, once I was taking that 3-year break, I started working with a local guy. He was actually out of Minneapolis. So a little bit, he wasn't quite local for me. So it was big time, it was somebody farther away. And his name was Jeff Zaller. He still coaches a ton of people today. He actually promotes the Twin Cities Open, which is a fantastic show for anyone wanting to do that. But he was kind of like the guy, if you will, around locally. And so I worked with him for almost 2 years during that time span, and did my first Classic Physique show ever with him. I think we got like 3rd or 4th. It was it was a very good experience, but that was a whole different level for me of having the accountability factor and the tool of having somebody there. And then less stress. I didn't have to change. I mean, I was changing my diet every couple of days for my first 2 or 3 shows because I just didn't know what I was doing. Where I was able to keep things so much more consistent and keep a much better look. And I've always been one to be with people smarter than me. I'm always trying to do that. I want to absorb information. So Jeff was that. He kind of comes from the Alan Kress, school of coaching, if you will. So it's very meticulous. There's a lot of information to it. And we tried all sorts of stuff. And I'm very thankful that I worked with him for that little while. But he was really the first person to like push me. Like, hey, you have something you can do something with it. You just have to work for it.
Excellent. So let's talk about when you started really getting into classic physique. And why don't you just unpack your competition history then for us up to the point where you earned your IFBB pro card?
Yeah. So after I did that first classic physique show with Jeff, I took another year off I knew I needed to grow. And I was about to get ready. It was like summer of 18 or 17 or something like that. And I was starting to think about getting ready for another show. And I remember Brett Wilkin had come to visit our gym and was training with Cole. And so I just sat there, like a fly on the wall and watched kind of in awe. And I think he was getting ready for junior nationals that year, where he turned pro. And he was probably like 6-7 weeks out, shredded, just how he always is. The guy never gets fat. And I just remember like thinking I had absorbed a lot of information from the guy I'm with. And this is somebody I just clicked right away with him. And it was one of those deals where I reached out the next day. I'm like, hey, do you coach athletes? Like, I would love to work with you. And he took me out. So then I started working with Brett Wilkin for almost 2 years. And he's the one that took me from just doing shows to do shows to trying to turn pro. That was the big thing I took away from Brett was the mindset aspect of be a professional, even if you're not a professional. Live every day like a professional, put in the work, good things will happen. So with him, it was really easy to make progress because I just could emulate. I just sat back and whatever Brett would do, I would try and do things the same exact way. So I studied his training. I was probably annoying. I asked a shit ton of questions regarding food and everything, but I wanted to be meticulous and I wanted to make sure he knew that. And he was the one that really started to push and push and push. And then we started doing national shows, and that's when it really kind of took off from there in terms of the drive of wanting it more.
So talk about then once you kind of started competing with Brett in your corner, some of those national competitions, because, from my understanding, I mean, it didn't take you that long to turn pro. So why don't you just talk about that first national competition and then we'll go from there.
So I was doing the show to get ready for my wedding, and I was going to go to Vegas right after this show. And that was like bachelor party. I was going to go to Vegas and we were going to go to the Olympia. That was the whole plan. Then I found out that they had the amateur Olympia. This was like 2018. So I was like, fuck it. Like, I'll just register for that. It's a big show. I'll just see where I'm at. Zero expectations. I just honestly was just doing it for fun and got out there and I got first call outs. So that was kind of like, oh shit. That was like I realized I was where I kind of wanted to be in a sense. Like I knew I could hang at that level. I just needed to make improvements. And I knew like the regional level, at least in our area, wasn't super, super competitive. And I was very competitive. I needed to compete more. So from there, Brett pretty much just put the game plan together like, hey, let's do juniors. So we did junior nationals that following summer. Got 5th, I believe. It was first call outs. So then I knew I was kind of knocking on the door there because the top 2's a pro card. So then we did Miami. We did nationals that year as well. It would be 2019. And again, got first call outs, but still came up short. So we knew at that point that I needed to take some time off. So we took about a year and then did USAs when they had moved it from July to December for COVID 2020. And moved locations like every 2 weeks, but that's a story in of itself. So it kind of worked out for our benefit having that extra almost 5-6 months. I was able to put more size on. We came in heavier every single show and better conditions. So that's a testament to Brett. You just accuracy on his plan and then demanding that I do the work. That was kind of the relationship we had. He'd send it and expect me to do it. And that's how it should be. But then after that, it's been off season since then. But yeah, that was finally 2020. We made it happen.
So you turned pro at the 2020 NPC USAs. Now talk about the emotions of that day, because obviously that was when COVID kicked off. All of us were going through all kinds of different things. And but once you kind of knew that the competition was going to happen, you went through prejudging. Why don't you just walk us through that? Because that is, a life-changing experience, and it's something that you'll never forget. So walk us through that day, please, Braden.
That was a pretty emotional day, because that prep sucked. I think anybody who prepped through, summer, fall of 2020 can attest to that. I mean, when I was prepping, gyms were shut down. So I was lucky enough that we were really good friends with Kelsey, the lady who owned the gym. So I had a key. I was going in the back door. I was going at weird times at night just to try and get my training in. I didn't want people pissed off at me, but I also knew what I was going for. I wasn't just at the gym to be at the gym. I was trying to literally kill myself for this dream that I had. And I wasn't going to let a shutdown stop me. And that was, so there was a lot of emotion, that went into that prep, and just, I don't know how many times I had to do my cardio, and I was doing an hour plus of intervals on the stairs alone at 9:00 at night in an empty gym. There's nobody there. There's nobody watching. But just, surviving through that and actually doing every single session. All that emotion came out afterwards. That was, my body just went limp. But it was a fantastic feeling. It didn't last long. That's usually how I work. I was, by the time I came away from backstage, I was on to the next. I didn't want to soak in it too much. I still haven't, to be truly honest, but there's a lot of work to do.
100%. So after prejudging then, I mean, were you pretty confident that you were going to get your pro card?
I was pretty confident going into the show. I had done quite a bit of posing with some people. So I had a lot of affirmations, people, saying, hey, you're going to have a good weekend, this and that, which, to be honest, I expected. But I think most athletes would say that, you expect that of yourself. It's not in a cocky way or anything like that. It's just, I trained for that. I every single day I trained to win. I didn't train to not win. I didn't train to not get a pro card. That was the goal going into it. So I had expected, to a degree, that to happen. But after prejudging, I felt pretty confident. Even going into prejudging, when I woke up, I was working with Andrew Vu at that time. I worked with him after I did the show in Vegas with Brett. I knew I needed to, again, go another level. So I went with Andrew Vu. We worked together for about 1.5 years before I got with Matt recently. So, I mean, I remember sending videos to Andrew in the morning, and he was like, we're on. So that's when I knew he's not one to give a lot of compliments. So when I got a compliment, that's when I kind of like, it clicked. Like, I was like, okay, it's showtime. And I was pretty confident on stage. I wasn't nervous for that show at all. I felt pretty good walking out there.
Excellent, man. Okay. So I want to take a step back, because one of your training partner, one of your good friends, somebody that you've already mentioned during our conversation, is Cole Eastvold. He was just on the podcast. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. Awesome individual. Love that guy. How did you guys actually, I know you said you guys trained at the same gym. You didn't really know him, but you saw him from afar off. He was already competing and stuff like that. But when did you guys actually start connecting in terms of training? And then why don't you kind of talk about, obviously Cole's talked about your guys' training a little bit, but talk about just your guys' training style, because some people that are going to listen to this episode may not have listened to Cole. So talk about connecting with Cole as a training partner, and then how do you guys train?
Yeah. So I think it was when I was getting ready for nationals, 2019. I had done juniors earlier in the summer, and got first call out. And I think for Cole, it was like, hey, this kid's actually serious. There wasn't too many other people in our area that were doing national level shows. Everyone would just kind of do the state show and then do the same state show the next year. No one would really progress and move forward. And I think him seeing me start to go that route, like I wasn't playing around. That's where I was going to go. I got a little bit of respect, I think, from him from that. But then he just saw that I was dying. It was probably 4 or 5 weeks out from nationals, and I think he came up to me when I was doing like a seated cable row, and I mean I couldn't even pull the cable back. I was toast, and so he just helped me through the workout, and that's all it was. He just helped me through that workout, and then we just started talking. And then the next day I saw him again. He helped me again. And eventually I just molded my training schedule to match his because I knew I needed to. And at that point, we were kind of working together. So there was no reason for us to not train together. We had a very similar schedule. I had my mornings free. I knew when he trained. And it just became, we realized that both of us had big goals, but they were pointed in the same direction. So it only made sense for us to push each other. Even though I'm smaller, I'm going to try and keep up, and he's going to try and not let me keep up. So that's my deal. I'm always chasing. I love working out with Cole because he's bigger and better than me. So I get to chase every single day. I'm the little rabbit, but at the same time, he has to create distance. So it's a give and take for both of us. We're each competing against each other, but we want to see each other win.
So, some people love having a training partner. Some people don't. Some people can't find a great training partner. That's actually probably a more realistic statement there. But you found somebody, and Cole's found somebody. Do you feel like both of you guys are really driven and self-motivated and all that type of stuff, right? But do you feel like Cole has really helped you take your bodybuilding career or your bodybuilding pursuit to that next level? And do you feel like you would be where you're at today, right now, if it wasn't for Cole?
Oh no, absolutely not. Yeah. I know that it's sped everything up. I think I maybe would have still reached a certain level, but that would have been exponentially later. That would have taken extra years. So it's definitely been a godsend. And we both know we're lucky. When we look around, there's not many places that you go to where you have two people that are highly, highly competitive, and then actually chasing that dream. You may have a guy at a gym here and there, but we've been pretty fortunate to be kind of put in the same area, have the same interests and the same goals in mind. And even now we're working. Both of us are working with Matt, so it's kind of brought everything full circle in a way. Now at one point I was working with Brett, and Brett was a buddy of ours. Now we're all working with Matt. We're all kind of working towards a goal. It's become kind of surreal to be honest, but it's a great company to be with, a great group of people.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more in depth, a training style, because a lot of people that are going to listen to the podcast, we don't always get into the training stuff, but I know some people are going to really appreciate this in terms of you're a pro, you're classic physique. Most of the guys that I bring on are more open. I've had classic, a few men's physique, but training with an open competitor, a future IFBB pro in Cole. How do you guys train? What's kind of that philosophy that you guys live by?
Yes, honestly, we don't really have like a set style. I like to feel like we flow between a few different styles all within the same training session. A lot of that, like I worked with John Jewett for a while in terms of like workout programming while I was working with Andrew Vu. So he really kind of opened up a lot more in-depth knowledge in terms of setting up your program, how to adjust your volume, basing your recovery. So you're not just, because my thing is I always did too much. I would just go in and go until I could not freaking move, which is great. But then when you start dieting, you can't recover from that. And recovery is kind of the tool you have to mitigate stress from recovery. So being able to then structure our training to help monitor our recovery has been fantastic. We've had less injuries, less soreness, less tightness, and we're still progressing. But we're, I would say, a little bit higher volume in total overall. That's just something I've always done since working with Brett. Brett was like a 5 sets, start at 20, go 15, go 10, go 20, just a shit ton of reps. And everything is always failure. Like I've done DC style with Cole. I've done just traditional push-pull legs. I've tried a little bit of everything. I would say traditionally I'm a heavy top set and some sort of intensifier on a second set, whether that be just to back off, a little bit lighter weight, more reps to increase the time. We may do clusters are a big one that we've been liking a lot more now. Clusters and rest pauses usually are 2 that we like to do, and that's always second. But we still like to push weight. Like we'll go 8 to 10, 8 to 12 for a top end rep range. So not super high, not super low. And then usually we'll do something in that 15 to 20 back off after that. But we're probably 5 to 7 movements a day. Nothing wild, nothing crazy, but we'll do a lot of working sets. We'll do 6 to 8 plus working sets minimum.
So talk to me, Braden, a little bit more about recovery. That's something you just mentioned. That's something that I think within the bodybuilding community, fitness community, there could be even more light shed on recovery. We always see everybody training on Instagram because that's kind of the cool thing. That's what catches people's eyes. But recovery, from my personal perspective, is just as important, if not more important, than any other aspect of bodybuilding if you want to have that longevity and you want to progress. So what does recovery outside of the gym look like for you off season? And then if it's different during prep, what is that difference?
I would say it's not much different usually. I do a lot of tissue work. We have a really great massage therapist here in our area that's kind of studies off me and Cole. She gets firsthand experience with us. So it's been fantastic to have her. Usually the only thing that'll change is I'll increase my frequency of that stuff. As I start to get a little bit lower in food, I may be doing 2 sessions a week. Chiropractor, that's another thing I like to do. I mean, when we're lifting weight, we're in odd positions all the time. So alignment is not something you will always keep. Muscles are going to be attached. They're pulling on bone. So as you're growing, things are coming out of line. So it's one of those things that it's easy to ignore. Feeling decent, feeling good. Oh, I don't need to be adjusted. So you'll go once every 2 months. If you make it consistent, once every 2 weeks or something like that, you'd be surprised what it can do for just muscle recovery. And then get sleep. That's the big thing. I get a lot of clients that, they're sleeping 3 hours a night, 5 hours a night, and expecting progress, and it's just not going to happen. You can't make up for that. So the sleep aspect can be huge. And I know from personal experience, I was always lift 6-7 days a week. If I can do more, I'm going to do more. I've had way better progress since doing 5 days a week than doing 6 by far.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk a little bit about sleep. Is there, some routines, rituals, or some things that you've kind of found through your bodybuilding experience to help you sleep better? Because I know, man, especially with like the technology, the phones that we have, the screens, the busy lives that everybody has, sleep in America, generally speaking, is way below what it should be, and it's everything in terms of muscle hypertrophy and muscle growth. So are there some routines, rituals, anything that you found to help you and your clients sleep better?
The big thing is the phone. I find that's probably the number one thing. I've made a habit. When I go to bed, it's to go to bed. What I've seen is a lot of people, they go to bed and that means on your phone, on TV, on this, on that. And that just starts the process right there. Your brain's not ready to go to sleep yet. So it's not going to go to sleep. So if I get into bed, usually phone goes away. That's number one. And obviously as you start to diet, sleep kind of starts to go. Some big things, I'm valerian root. That's an easy one. It doesn't give you that same grogginess like a melatonin would the next day. And tea. I usually do some sort of like a sleepy time or a nighttime tea with chamomile, valerian, and I'll take ashwagandha, just little things to help bring stress down. If it brings stress down, typically you're more relaxed. If you're relaxed, you'll fall asleep. A lot of times when you're not falling asleep, it's just because you're anxious. Your mind is awake, it's racing. If you can calm that down, and then put the phone away, usually sleep happens much, much better. And then it lasts a lot longer. You're not getting that choppy sleep. But sleep is definitely the biggest thing I harp on with clients, for sure.
Love it, man. Okay. So before we kind of get into some of your future aspirations in terms of bodybuilding, I want to ask you something that you've brought up just again during our conversation quite a few times. You've alluded to, or you've said, like, you don't like to be maybe the smartest person in the room. You always want to be learning. You want to be around people that are ahead of you, right? Where does that come from? Because that's something that, is difficult to learn. Maybe it's something that's innate within us, but that's something that a lot of people don't have. A lot of people, especially when they attain a certain status, they kind of like to be the big dog, right? Where does that come? Is that something from childhood, or is that something that you picked up along your athletic career? Or talk about that a little bit more.
The first time I noticed that was doing football camps. I knew my level of play, and I would go to these camps, and I would always find myself in the group of the top athletes or the recruits who are being looked at. And when I was with them, I always played better. I always kind of leveled up to their level in a sense. And so that it just, at every camp I did, I just started to notice that. So then once I noticed it, I started to seek it out, because I knew that was a ticket to get better. That was a much faster ticket than reading anything or being told anything, is to go perform with people who are much better than you and get beat, get humbled, but then learn from it. Don't get beat and then piss and moan, because you won't take anything from that. But I spent the majority of those camps getting the shit kicked out of me, and seeking it out on purpose, because I knew if I did that, I would come out better than I went in. And I've just always kind of adopted that into every aspect of life is, hey, the fastest way to learn something is go find the smartest guy and just pick his brain. You'll learn stuff that you'll never learn from a book.
Perfect, man. I love it. That's beautiful, Braden. Okay. So let's talk about you earned your IFBB pro card in 2020. Talk about the time off, talk about that decision. And then I think Cole wanted to, but he's like, I'll let Braden talk about the competition this year. So lead us then into what your plans are for 2022, because I'm very curious to hear what your plans are.
Yeah. So after that, that show was December 2020. And that's pretty much the end of the year. There's no shows right away after that. And I wasn't ready to jump into a show anyway. But so I just kind of went back to the drawing board, started working on adding some tissue. Not long after that show, we opened our gym. So I think we started opening the gym in like February of 2021. So then it just became all out effort of getting that going and focus on that. And I didn't want to deal with trying to prep for a show and give any half-ass effort to it. I wanted the gym to succeed. So I pretty much took all of 2021 to kind of focus on getting that to a good spot and just continuing to try and grow. And then I actually had switched over to Matt. My time with VU was coming up, and I just knew, again, I wanted something different. And I had started working with Matt for my exercise programming, not even my nutrition. So I was kind of working with them both at the same time. And I just really clicked with Matt. It was more of it was what I was familiar with in football. I will say that, like, that coach athlete kind of respect relationship was just very unique. And I kind of knew that going into it. I expected that to be there. And when it was very eye-opening, because then I received it so much better. And with him, he just wanted time. So it was a matter of, hey, let's not jump into a show. We were focused on Cole at the time anyway. We had some big goals for him. And so I was just focused on trying to stay healthy and push him through his show. And then we took the rest of 21 off. It was just, the shows were kind of all over the place. So the game plan has always been sometime in the summer. And I finally just settled on, I think I'm going to do Chicago. So end of July, Chicago Pro. It's somewhat close. I wanted to do a relatively local show. just friends, family, you know, all that good fun stuff. You only get one debut. So
Very cool. So I mean, are you excited about the pro debut? Are you just like all business? Like what are kind of your thoughts about that?
a little bit of both. I'm excited to compete again, but it's 100% business. There's still a lot of work to do. I'm not where I want to be. Grant, I don't think I ever will be. I don't think anybody is, but I know that it's going to be a big show. You know, Chicago's not just some slough show. It's a big show. There's going to be some big names, and I want to see where I stand.
So, what is kind of like your future vision or future goal with bodybuilding? Like, do you kind of think 2 years ahead, or are you just fully focused on the next competition? How do you kind of approach that, Braden?
I've kind of been looking at things from like a 5 year, like, hey, this time in 5 years, where would I like to be? What's the actual end game? That way I can backtrack from there and make sure I'm working towards that. I think everybody's goal is to make it to the Olympia. I'm not delusional in the sense I'm not probably going to win the Olympia. You know, that happens to one person. And there's a lot of good people. It's a great goal to have. But realistically, first goal is make it, you know, qualify, which means win a show. I don't necessarily want to go on points. I would like to win a show to go. So that's another goal. I would love to get top 10. Top 10 in Olympia would be kind of like a lifetime. Hey, if I could check that one off the list, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Excellent. So, let's talk about coaching here before we kind of wrap things up. You've worked with some of the most elite coaches, you know, within the IFBB and the amateur ranks, but coaching for yourself, when did you start coaching? And then what are some things that coaching has taught you about yourself, about bodybuilding, about life?
Yeah. So 2019, I was getting ready for nationals and I had gone out to Armbrust to visit Brett. I was like 5-6 weeks out from the show. And I just saw the culture that they had there with their trainers, their coaching. Everything was very organized. Everything was all independent. You could pick and choose. I thought it was like a fantastic model for how they did everything. And I knew that there just wasn't anything local. I knew I wasn't the smartest guy, but I had enough knowledge where I could help a lot of the younger people that just didn't have anything. So when I came back from that trip, I created High Grade Physiques, which is our coaching company. And that was like the day I landed. I was like, hey, I need a name. I got to come up with something here. Because I wanted it to be a professional, not just Braden Bentley bodybuilding. You know, I wanted it to be something that I could have other people on with me and we could actually grow a community of competitors. And naturally, Cole was there with me. So, you know, me and him, we just kind of already had started helping some people, but we just came together on a very organized collective front. And a lot of it was just helping people with diet, helping people with training. And we over the years, since 2019, it's just been progressing that much further. And obviously me and him have both worked with very good coaches. So we're able to take the way that they model programs and, you know, their outlines so that things look more professional and little stuff like that. I got to see that firsthand with Brett when he started working with Matt. You know, I got to see the original Brett coach, Buddy. And then all of a sudden by the end, he's a full blown coach. You know, everything's structured and there's emails and we're doing all this stuff. And I just thought that was really cool to see his progression. And I wanted to be able to help any of the younger people that wanted to compete, because competing it's not a very big thing in our area. You know, we don't have a local show here. You have to travel to do them. We probably have 15 people, 20 people who compete. So just to be able to be like a local voice, or if anybody has a question, they know where they can go. That's why we started doing it. And it's kind of progressed from there. I got people kind of from all over, New Zealand, Germany, Australia. Love the internet, I guess. So
now is your goal with the coaching, Braden, to kind of like at some point kind of like you know, there's never going to be another Matt Jansen, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Like, do you kind of want to make this like your full-time profession, and once your competing career is over, like be known as, you know, a guru or a coach, and kind of you know, create you know, an empire with the coaching? Or is this just something in alignment with your competing for now?
I think it's more just in alignment. I don't really have any big aspirations for coaching. I think my big thing is just trying to expand on the gym. I think that'll be something that I put a lot of time and focus into. Right now we're at like a 2,500 square foot, almost a studio, if you will, that we've just packed with a lot of really good equipment. Eventually I'd like, in our area, I think we could handle having a much larger facility that kind of caters more to the, Midwest bodybuilding Mecca type style. So we'll definitely, I'm already starting to work on some plans for that. So that's probably going to be where I put a lot more of my focus in the future, after competing and things like that.
So talk about the den. Cole and I talked about it a little bit, but again, we might catch some people that didn't listen to his episode. So talk about the den, talk about its location, talk about how it's kind of set up in terms of membership or not membership, and then just expand a little bit more on your vision for growing it in the future, because Cole had brought that up as well.
Yeah. So I think Flex Lewis is the one to blame for all of this. All of his Dragon's Lair videos, I thought they were so freaking cool. Just got your own place, all your equipment. And so I'd always wanted my own place to train. And then 2020, just having the shutdowns and how everything went, I knew that I was going to be pro at some point. I didn't know it was going to be that show or whatever. And I also didn't want to have that be an impact for that career. So we just started looking at places, and I'm pretty spontaneous. So I just do things, if I have a plan or a vision, I'm going to go for it. I don't sit on it for too long. So I looked at 2 places and signed on it right away and figured it out from there. It was one of those where I knew that I needed the spot. And during 2020, I had bought a shit ton of equipment and put it in my garage. I trained clients almost full time then at that point at the gym. So luckily, most of them, they made the drive to come to Stewartville, which is like 15 miles away. And I just trained people out of my garage. In the winter, it's 30 degrees, the bar's fucking cold. And I knew that wasn't long-term. Like, that's not going to happen. So, and we already had equipment. So it was a matter of just facilitating the rest of the equipment with what we wanted, and then finding a spot. And once we found a spot, it was on. And I got pretty fortunate. We had some people that helped out as far as like the construction, and we knew some construction guys, so they came in, helped do the tear down. In our spot, we were very meticulous on where we were. I wanted to be close to downtown Rochester. Rochester is a weird setup in the way that it's laid out. It's pretty expansive, even though it's not big. Like, it takes forever to get from one end to the other. So I wanted to be centrally located just for the ease of everyone coming there. It was the only spot we could find. I didn't really think of it too much. We just signed on it and made it happen. We've made the best of it so far. It's a little crammed. It's a little crammed. We got a lot of shit in there though. We decided on more equipment, less space. We don't need space. We need equipment.
Right.
But in terms of like memberships, we have probably 30, 35 people that are there. It's pretty much just covers the rent. We didn't open this place to make money. It's not a profit gym. It's hey, let's all collectively have our own spot to train, and no bullshit, no drama. If anyone wants to do their content stuff, there's nobody in your way. It's a pretty unique atmosphere.
I love that, man. So are you guys, cause Cole Cole kind of mentioned in the future at some point, maybe expanding, is that kind of the vision that you guys have, and maybe open it up to the general pop, or are you going to try to always kind of keep it more private?
We'll keep this location probably private for the most part, mainly just for space. I don't want it to ever get too busy, because I feel like that'll be a detraction from the atmosphere. I want everyone to kind of be able to almost have their own space. I don't want people on top of each other. Like, you go to some gyms at 5 o'clock and it's just a zoo. And even if it's the greatest gym in the world, it's kind of a shit environment because you can't do anything. So we've been controlling that. Like, I ask people when they train. I'm trying to stack people so it's never too busy. But our plan is to move from our location to another location that's much larger, and expand on the equipment and actually have a full-fledged open to the public gym. So I would call this kind of like our beta test. This is our little project to make sure it's going to work how we want. Because I also want that to be somewhat exclusive. I would like The problem is most gyms spend way too much money on equipment. So they need so many people to make do. Well, if we have all of our equipment already and already paid for, we could limit memberships. And that's essentially what we would like to do, is still keep this very exclusive environment of 300-400 people and have a waiting list if need be, like a pure muscle type of a business model, if you will.
I love that. So since I know you and Cole are equipment junkies, what is there kind of like, let's go new school, old school, okay? Just make this kind of fun. Is there like a brand, like old school brand that you guys really like, specifically just, you know, yourself? And then is there like a new school brand that you really like?
Old school, I think some of the old Cybex is really tough to beat. You know, some Atlanta stuff is really good too, but I would say, like, as a whole, if you could only pick one brand to do a gym, I probably would lead towards a little bit of the older Cybex, the VR2 style or VR1 even on some pieces. But new school is tough. I like Arsenal. It's kind of also old school because of Nebula, but they've updated some stuff definitely to make it better. Same with Prime. We have an old Strive piece, which is the old Prime. We have a new Prime piece in our gym, so we have a little bit of both, and they're so similar. I like both of them, but Prime and Arsenal, I would put it probably the top of our list.
Cool. If you could have one piece of equipment, not you know, like any, just a movement, not like a barbell squat, but any piece of gym equipment, if you could only have one, okay, and it's something that you're gonna, you know, get a lot of utility out of, you're gonna be able to train most of your body parts. What piece, what brand are you gonna take?
Oh man, that's tough. I think I lead towards multi-flex from Arsenal, just because you could do so many things on that. I've wanted to put that in our gym. We just got no room for it. If I could add like 100 square feet, I would put one of those in for sure. That and a belt squat. You know, belt squat, you could do so many different things with a belt squat being that cable. I would probably lead with one of those two for sure.
Cool. I see you guys, because I see you guys posting up your training videos and stuff, more Cole than you, but so I've seen a lot of the equipment that you guys have. It looks awesome. I mean, I'm in Iowa. I'm only maybe like 3 or 4 hours away from you guys, so at some point I'll have to get up there. But I see you guys using the Cybex Smith machine quite a bit. Is that a piece that you guys like to incorporate with numerous body parts in your training?
Yeah, so we actually had another Smith too. Cole, they had one from their company. So we had a Life Fitness in there, and it wasn't for us. You know, there was something about it. It just didn't quite feel right. And we had used, one of our gyms in town had a long time ago, they had an old Cybex, and they got rid of it. But they didn't know what they had. And so I searched online as long as I could. And as soon as I found one, I met the guy like 2 days later. I went up, took the thing apart, brought it back down. It's probably 15 years old, but the thing is fantastic. I will say, there's no Smith that is like a Cybex, old Cybex, not the new shit.
Yeah, for sure. Did you get it for a bargain price, or did you have to spend a little money on it?
I wasn't too bad. I think I paid like $1,200 for this
Oh,
thing.
that's not bad at all.
Not bad at all.
No, not at all, man. All right. So Braden, we're going to wrap it up here, but I want to ask you, I saw in your Instagram stories, you got some new ink, I think just this last week on your hands, right? So it says self-made, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's that.
Self-made. And then I did on the thumbs. I'm Norwegian as hell. So I did Nordic symbols for strength and courage.
Okay. So tell me about self-made. Obviously we know what that means, but for you, what does that mean? And why did you decide you're going to get that tattooed on your knuckles?
I think it has a lot of meanings. I think especially in bodybuilding, right? Like, no one does the work for you. It doesn't matter who you work with or who's helping you. Nobody does the work for you. So in a way, you have to make yourself. And at the end of the day, we are all responsible for our lives. So you make the life that you want. And that was just something that's always kind of resonated with me. I've always had a quote. I got a quote on my other bicep that is, our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising when we fall. So the little mantras like that, like little reminders, like, hey, you got this. You've made it this far. You can keep going. I think that's where the self-mades always kind of come from.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. I saw that on your stories. I was like, man, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna have to ask Braden about that.
It hurts. I'll say that knuckles suck.
Oh yeah, dude. Well, I've got tattoos on the top of my hands. Those suck. I'm sure the knuckles are not fun either. You know, I always get blown away with the people that get the tattoos like right on the front of their neck. I'm like, dude, like, first of all, that's not my style. But second of all, I was like, dude, I would never have artwork done on my neck. Like it's just crazy, dude. Don't you think?
Man, like on the throat too. I don't know how you do that.
Oh man, I don't know either. They've got something I don't. That's for sure. So let's finish with this, Braden. In terms of bodybuilding, you've been training now for a handful of years. You're a pro. You're just kind of in the beginning stages of your pro career. Who knows where bodybuilding is going to take you in the future? But what has bodybuilding taught you? What has bodybuilding given you?
Bodybuilding is given a lot. I think in sports you learn an aspect of discipline. Bodybuilding just enhances that. You don't have people necessarily coming to help you to make your food. Make sure you're organized. No one really cares if you have your food. No one understands what you're doing. So the discipline aspect, it's really enhanced that, and kind of given me an insight that I can do whatever I want. I just have to do it. And that's something I've really been appreciative from bodybuilding. You set your mind to it. If you work hard enough at it, it will happen, as long as it's meant to be. And that's something you get out of bodybuilding. You don't get in shape by not doing the work. You have to do the work to get there. You don't add muscle without doing the work. So it's the aspect of just understanding and realizing, just do it, and it'll be there. It'll happen.
100%. All right, Braden. So, first of all, before I give you kind of the final words here, I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast, man. Thank you for sharing your story, chopping it up with us for a little bit. Before I do the outro here, if you have any final thoughts or any final words that you want to leave with all of us, please do that. Any shout outs, any sponsors, the platform is yours to share any of that information. Also, share with us your Instagram, please. Okay.
Yeah. So Instagram is just IFBB Pro _ my name, Braden Bentley. I think me and Cole share our YouTube. So if you follow the YouTube channel, we'll be pumping out some content from that, especially as we're both going to be prepping at the same time this year, which that'll be pretty exciting. He'll be doing USA's a week after I do Chicago. So it'll be kind of boom, boom. And we got big goals. So that'll be something definitely to stay tuned for. Other than that, just shout out to the Den family. We got a lot of them. They're all going to be watching. So shout out to you guys. We're coming up on our 1-year anniversary. So it's thank you guys, for supporting us and coming along for everything.
Very cool, man. So, Braden, I talked to Cole about this too, but maybe a few weeks out from your pro debut, I'd love to have you come back on the podcast, man. Just chop it up, see how prep went. Is that something that you'd be down with?
Absolutely, man. I'd love to come back.
Cool. Very cool, man. So thank you again, Braden, for coming on. I appreciate it. All right.
Absolutely, man. You take care.
Okay, cool. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you very much for tuning in, listening, watching. If it wasn't for you, the podcast would not exist. So I appreciate you. I thank you. If you haven't done so already, make sure you guys head over to Behind the Muscle on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. That's really important because I release all these episodes first on YouTube, and then I'll shoot them out to the other podcast platforms. So if you want to stay up on all the podcast episodes current, make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube. And then one final favor I'd ask of all of you, take this episode of Braden's, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Braden, tag Behind the Muscle so that we know you listen specifically to this episode and found great value in it. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.